Welcome everybody to round 2 of the Content Creator Set Champs. I'm up against Kawa, who is from the Lorcana podcast. Make sure you check him out. Good friend of the channel. You can see Tim lurking behind us, who's one of the game developers at Ravensburger. I lose the die roll. Kawa, a good friend of mine. I always find it a sign of respect when playing amongst friends not to cut the deck. Wouldn't advise doing that though in tournaments. Just my own little thing I like to do sometimes. And yeah, Kawa's going first. I know what deck he's playing. So my mulligan's pretty important because he's playing the dreaded, the nasty, the Diablo Bucky deck. This is the match I want to win the most in the whole tournament. You guys know I'm not a big fan of Diablo Bucky. I find it a little bit miserable to play against, as I'm sure many of you can share that opinion. So this is one I really want to do well in. Going to be a bit of an uphill battle going second. Of course, I'm looking for babooms. Looking for a decent early curve to get some early questing through. Yeah, definitely important that I do know what I'm up against here because that helps me to make a slightly more informed decision. And I decided to hold on to the Belle. Obviously, the Smee makes sense to hold on to, being a turn 2 play. Not really sure I should have held on to this Belle, but it is, of course, a potential threat and way for me of dealing with Diablo, which is why I decided to hold on to it. Cal's going to open things up with a Diablo Ink. And you can see I'm not happy about that. Confirmed. I had a pretty strong suspicion, I think, that it was a Diablo, but I wasn't crystal clear at this moment in time. But now, of course, I am. But I mulliganed with that in mind. In comes a Diablo. He gets to see my hand, and it's always a very nice feeling when your opponent reaches over for one of your cards to have a little read of exactly what it does. Belle is, when entering the board, able to move up to 3 damage from one counter to a different card. And that is going to be pretty impactful. By the way, these games are absolutely wild. Probably the 2 most insane Disney Lorcana games ever, and it's back-to-back. So this is the second round. If you didn't see the first video, I played against Raven, who I did take down. He was on Ruby Amethyst. Kawa also winning his first round match. There's 4 rounds of Swiss. So every game really does matter. It was a top 4 cut with 16 players. Diablo's going to quest for 1 with Bucky down on the board. I've got my Maleficent ready to go, and I don't think I would have been quite as confident playing my Maleficent on turn 1 unless I didn't top deck the Snake like I did the previous turn, because that just lets me know that I've got a clear game plan for turn 2. If I didn't draw this Snake the previous turn on turn 1, I would have maybe been more inclined to go for the Magic Broom on turn 1, as then I've just got a safe way of drawing after that and playing Smee. But here, that 1 extra lore can definitely make a big impact. I'm trying to be the aggressor in this matchup. I want to be able to play things like Queen's Castle and force Kawa to slam into it rather than questing. Every lore matters for that, especially when you're playing a deck which is filled with goats. So 4 goats, 1 spell book are my ways to try and cross the finish line in the late game. Pretty good start for me. I've got some early board control with the Snake. That 2 lore on the board is also nice. And a very interesting turn 3 play with a 1 cost Flynn into a shift Flynn. I can't put the Maleficent into my Inkwell, so it's a good option to just discard. Job done for Maleficent now. Hope you guys like Flynn Rider, because this Flynn Rider, spoiler alert, does not leave the board for the entire game. And that is a good time to mention one of the main inclusions I didn't have, which I wanted to play for this matchup in particular, which is Smash. Belle does give us some similar features to Smash, being able to move damage counters. Most of the time, it's only kind of 2 damage counters you can move anyway. But the Smash can be a really nice option to deal with the Flynn, deal with the Ursula Deceiver of All, another way of dealing with Diablo. But of course, it's pretty slow in other matchups. It's not a card you want, but I wasn't expecting much Bucky, so I decided not to go for too many copies of Smash. In fact, 0, but I was very close to playing up to 4 at one point. I was considering playing 4. Obviously, you need to find that balance between having enough removal to deal with these Diablo decks reliably, while also having some good top decks that can quest as well. Pretty happy with the board state here for me. With the Magic Broom, the Smee, the Snake, I've got good stats on the board. I'm going quite wide as well, so I'm able to challenge lots of Kawa's characters at once, because he's also got 4 characters down on the board. Bit of an interesting decision on what to discard here. I decided to go for the Belle. It was either Baboon Belle or Rabbit Obviously, the Baboom I really value to try and remove that Diablo if it comes down, because it could even come down this turn with the shift. And the Rabbit is just a clean turn 4 play, particularly as there is no Diablo 3 cost down on the board. The Rabbit's not going to be drawing my opponent a card, fortunately. So Belle was the obvious card to get rid of there. And another Rabbit enters my hand, which is a bit of an awkward one. This is one of the key advantages of Chernobog's Followers over Magic Broom. If this was a Chernobog's Followers, I'd be able to quest, draw with the Chernobogs, and then maybe find something else to ink. But of course, with the Magic Broom, I have to have a card down on, I have to play a character card to draw, which forces me, regrettably, to ink the Baboom. But 7 lore at this stage in the game is pretty impressive. That's what Smee gives you, that early questing power with some board control. The Maleficent and the Snake doing something similar as well. Rabbit comes through, and Chernobog's Followers is the card I draw. Now, I just let my opponent know at this moment in time I'm thinking whether or not I'm going to draw with my Magic Broom. If I leave the Magic Broom on the board, I do provide them with an opportunity to remove it pretty easily with the Aladdin. And I don't like the look of that. The other benefit here about drawing at this moment in time is the fact that it's going to mitigate a little bit of the questing power of Flynn Rider. Flynn Rider has 4 lore, but loses 1 lore for every card I have in hand. So that 1 extra card off the Magic Broom is 1 less lore for the Flynn Rider. Play passes on back over to Kawa. He's going to sing Let the Storm Rage On with Aladdin. Of course, allows him to draw as well. Very, very efficient answer for Smee. Smee's just so powerful because of its ability to quest for 2 while having great stats. So being able to just deal 2 damage like that while drawing and spending no ink is a huge momentum shift in this game and is leaving me in a pretty precarious position, particularly when the Jafar comes through and forces me to discard Queen's Castle, Chernobog's Followers, and Rabbit the options. A lot of people are going to discard Chernobog's Followers here. I decide to go for the Castle. The Castle is not going to be good anytime soon with all this board presence which Kawa has managed to develop. And the Chernobog's Followers, I think, is the most over-inked card in the game, most over-discarded card. It's just so good. I can play it down at some point, find the right moment for it, and then draw. I think it's just well worth holding on to for this moment in time. That the potential of it is huge, and the Castle is not going to be good anytime soon. Great top deck with the friends. Very interesting decision at this moment in time as well. Of course, I don't have a giant Tinkerbell, but I have now drawn the tiny tactician Tinkerbell, which could give Kawa some things to consider, because of course I would have the option of shifting that Tink in and challenging instantly. I think the tiny Tinkerbell, the more I've played with it, has really just impressed me with that ability to impose big threats onto my opponent's side of the board in terms of the potential. I do draw a Chernobog with the Snake, 2 inks still available, with that Rabbit back in my hand, ready for a rainy day. And the Snakes are just really good on the board here because they're allowing me to start getting some board control, preventing Kawa from wanting to quest of too many things. But I can also get that Tiny Tink down as well. Of course, Tiny Tink also providing me with an opportunity to sing Friends if I have that as well. And I do at this moment in time decide to trade. Reason is, if I quest here with the Snake, then Kawa is given the opportunity to remove it very cleanly with the Jafar, which would remain on the board. So my options there really are I either do nothing with the Snake or I take the trade. And it definitely seems like a more productive decision to take the trade at that moment in time. Robin Hood comes through. Bucky Boy still on the board, so I discard a Rabbit, I do believe that was. It certainly was. Flynn Rider's going to quest, evening things up to 7. But here is where the Tiny Tink Tactician is applying a lot of pressure. If Kawa is to quest with any of these other characters, the Diablo and the Jafar, the Shift Tinkerbell, which I don't have at this moment in time, would be able to come through, dealing 1 damage to everything, and then challenge a Jafar or Diablo and deal that 2 other damage to Flynn Rider. So the Tiny Tink Tactician is really slowing Kawa down here. So not only is the threat of the Giant Tink great with the Tinkerbell, but also the ability to sing Friends. And there is the Giant Tink and another copy of Friends on the other side. So of course I could spend 4 here to shift Tink, but then I have nothing else to play. So more likely a better decision for me here, because the Tink is going to be exerted if she enters play as well already, is just to spend the 6 to get Tink through, removing the Bucky. That leaves me with a Tinkerbell potentially to still go through. I think I actually ink Friends, which is a little bit controversial, but I think the other card I have in hand is the Belle, and I really want to try and get rid of this Flynn Rider. I'm a little bit worried that my Tinkerbell's just getting removed anyway, so Singing Friends might not be great. Of course, there could be an Ursula. I'm not sure, though. It's definitely an interesting decision there from myself. A key decision to ink the Friends there instead of inking Belle. It is the only other Belle I have available. I only have 2 in the deck. One, of course, is in the discard pile already. But this Belle in hand, I have big plans for it. I'm looking at trying to get 2 damage counters on something and then moving them on to the Flynn Rider to remove it. Kawa does trade the Jafar Dreadnought for the Snake. Of course, is going to draw a card for it. Currently, I'm 1 lore ahead. This Flynn Rider hasn't actually quested yet this turn. He just forgot to ready it. Of course, all these cards have already dried. They've been down on the turn for at least... down on the board for at least a turn, so Kawa is able to quest and challenge with them. Aladdin comes through, thank goodness. Not going to be discarding because of Bucky being removed by Tinkerbell the previous turn. Kawa with 1 card in hand and 2 ink available. Doesn't have any card draw engines. No Sad Beast. The Beast Tragic Hero, that is. No Diablo, or at least not the 3 cost, which draws cards. And I've now got a Tinkerbell on the board, which is applying a lot of pressure. And it's not only the tiny Tink applying pressure, but the giant Tink herself. It's really interesting that this 3-cost Tink was almost working in a similar way to the giant Tink just because of the threat of that shift and instant challenge. I think I really underestimated how powerful the tiny Tink is. In comes the Rabbit, allowing me to draw a card. No Diablo down, so that's always nice. And Zeus is a great find. Very, very key decision here. I could try and delay the Zeus for a turn and sing it with the Rabbit. But I decide to go for it straight away, removing the Robin Hood. Just getting that board control. Of course, doesn't get card draw off that either. And that's also going to allow me to have the ability to quest with Tinkerbell and feel a little bit more safe. And this proved to be a huge decision because this next turn, Kawa is going to play an Ursa the Deceiver. And the Ursa the Deceiver discarding the Zeus probably would have been a game-winning swing moment there for Kawa. So very glad I decided to go for that. Also important that I decided to go for the card draw before questing or anything like that with Tinkerbell, because the card draw, I think, allowed me to find the Zeus, which then allowed me to make that better play. There's the Ursula, Goat and Belle in hand. And that is very, very important information for Cal, because suddenly the surprise value of my Belle has disappeared. I had some big plans to try and get that 2 damage counters on a Tinkerbell or a Rabbit or something like this, and then remove the Flynn as Tinkerbell gets removed. But now that Kawa knows what's going on with the Belle, he can play around that. But that is also going to be potentially problematic because it's going to maybe mean Kawa can't make as many quests as he might wish to do. So, Flynn Rider quests, and then of course the Ursula is drying, so can't do it, can't challenge or anything like that. The Diablo has the option to do nothing, challenge Tinkerbell, which doesn't look very good, and of course just decides to quest for 1. Not quite so scared of the threat of the Tinkerbell anymore because he saw my hand. Of course, the top deck of Tinkerbell here would be able to clear the Flynn Rider, but that is not what I draw into. I have Belle, a Goat, and a Maleficent. And I want to keep that Belle to continue threatening the damage counters being moved onto Flynn as much as possible. But what I also need to consider is the more cards I have in hand, the less Flynn quests for. I told you it was an interesting game. So I'm trying to balance out the ability to quest, gain board control, while also mitigating the value of Flynn. And the damage counter mind games here are really, really fascinating as well. The fact that Kawa knows I have Belle is very key information for them as well. So if you just imagine, if that wasn't the case, I could get a damage counter onto either Tinkerbell or the Rabbit here. I go for the damage counter onto the Rabbit. Now in the next turn, if Kawa quests with the Ursula, I could challenge the Ursula with the Rabbit and then move those 2 damage counters onto the Flynn Rider. So the fact that I have the Belle is very interesting, but it's even more interesting that Kawa knows I have the Belle because he has the potential to play around it. That's also, you can kind of see the value of having some unorthodox cards in your deck as well, like Belle, which players don't expect. They don't play around it, and therefore you can get some really, really nice value from it. In this case, of course, Kawa sees I have it, so he's able to play around it. But Kawa in top deck mode and draws a 1-drop. That is not what you want to see if your name is Kawa, and it's a big, big relief for me. I certainly did need quite a bit of luck in this one, as Flynn Rider Quest putting him up to 15. But that Maleficent as well, able to come down on the board and threatening 2 lore in a single turn is really, really valuable. You can see why I love this card so much. It gave me that 1 lore on turn 1, that 1 extra lore compared to like a Chernobogs or a Magic Broom or a Pascal, and it's now threatening another extra lore compared to a Chernobogs or a Pascal. Of course, it's uninkable. Especially from the future here. I've had some microphone issues, unfortunately. It's actually the 3rd time I've had to record over some bits. Fortunately, here, it's just a couple little minutes I had where the microphone went very, very dodgy. It's been a very inefficient recording session. Spent the last 2 hours voicing over this 40-minute video, so please do give the video a like if you've enjoyed it. I hope it's been worth it, and I hope my microphone stops playing up. Board state's really interesting at this moment in time. With that Maleficent, I'm going quite wide. But I have to massively prevent Kawa from getting to 20. Of course, Flynn Rider can quest for 4, depending on how many cards I have in hand, with the Robin Hood and the Ursula being a guaranteed 1, which puts them to 17. So I need to make sure that the Flynn Rider can only quest for 1 here, which means I need to have at least 3 cards in hand. I quest out with everything with the exception of Tinkerbell here. This is simply just because I'm considering the possibility that I might want to use the ability to draw a card and then discard a card with Tinkerbell if I don't value the 1 lore at this moment in time. I decide I do just want to take the 1 lore though with Tinkerbell. Of course, Flynn Rider is evasive, so not possible to be challenged. Kawa still in top deck mode with a whole bunch of ink available. I think anything they draw at this moment in time, they're going to be able to play. It's like 1 card in hand for me at this moment in time or something like this. Oh, forgive me, it's not because of the Flynn. Quite a lot of cards in hand. Flynn's not questing for much at all. There goes the Flynn, putting Kawa up to 17. So it's 3 in hand. Does mean at this moment in time, a Robin Hood or a Sudden Chill, like a Robin Hood Shift that is, because of course that would add that 1 extra quest, or a Sudden Chill, which would discard a card from my hand, allowing Flynn to quest for an extra, would have caused me some serious issues, as Kawa would have got to 20. But clearly that wasn't the top deck, because he would have snapped it up. And now Kawa is trying to ensure that I myself don't get to 20 this turn. So the Maleficent is going to be a key target. But all the while also needs to be considering this Belle that I have available. So often here, the card which Kawa has drawn, in this case, is Zeus. So Kawa often, usually in a normal situation, would just be using Zeus on the goat, which would of course deny me being able to bounce it back and gaining more lore through that avenue. But this 1 damage counter on the rabbit here, 2 cards in hand it is, the 1 damage counter on the rabbit, really, really important here, because the Ursula is going to be wanting to challenge the Maleficent. And that 1 damage counter on the rabbit actually means that Kawa is forced to Zeus the rabbit instead of the goat. And I get to draw an extra card for that as well, which potentially decreases the questing power of Flynn next turn as well. So even though Belle hasn't come through here, she's applied so much pressure. If you imagine the goat was removed by Zeus here, the rabbit could then challenge the Ursula. And then I could move those 2 damage counters from the rabbit onto the Flynn. Now this Robin Hood, similarly, is unable to quest, because if it does, I could challenge the Robin Hood with Tinkerbell or Goat and move those damage counters on over to Flynn. I draw the Magic Broom, so 4 cards in hand right now, which means that the Flynn is currently questing for 0 if I don't play anything. One of the cards I do have in my hand here is a Magic Broom, which of course gives me the possibility to play the broom, play a character, and then the broom will replace itself instantly, which thins my deck, increases the odds of me finding some more bounce cards, some more goats to help me cross the finish line. The other thing I want to consider here is if I wish to remove the Ursula. So I could remove the Ursula and then go down to 3 cards in hand which would allow Kawa to quest for 2 unless they top deck a Robin Hood Shift or a discard card. But I'm pretty happy I decided to just take the risk on the Robin Hood top deck or the Sudden Shield top deck. But what I do want to do is try and play 1 card from my hand down on the board, which is going to mean, in order to do that, I'm going to have to remove the Ursula if I go down to 3 cards. Now, I decide I want to challenge the Ursula. And I don't really want to put any damage counters into my goat in case that means it can be removed before I can bounce it back. Or removed more easily before I can bounce it back. Obviously that Robin Hood could trade into it. So that's why I go for the Tinkerbell challenge. And I'm going to spend 1 for the Magic Broom. And I have a decision to make on what the other card is. Of course, Churnabogs, Smee, and Belle the options. It's never going to be Churnabogs because that quests for 1. Whereas the others quest for 2. And Belle might make the most sense simply because she's the most expensive. But there's not a real punish available for Kawa to stop me playing the Smee, right? He has 2 characters on board, so Strength can't remove the Smee. Don't think he plays Smash. And what I decide to do, and I think it's a really key decision, is I decide to go for the Smee instead for just 2. This leaves me with some ink available still. I think 3 ink still available. Even though the camera is a little bit off. Again, I'm going to make sure I improve this for the next time I record in person. The Smee comes through. I'm able to draw with the Broom, which means Kawa can only quest for a total of 2. So I have 3 cards in hand. And I'm able to draw with the Goat. And then I still have 3 ink available. And the decision to go for the Smee instead of the Belle allows me to this turn still play the Goat, play this Fox, which I just top deck, bouncing the Goat back, and I'm suddenly at 18 with the Goat in hand. Feeling very, very confident indeed. Now it all comes down to the top deck. A Sudden Chill off the top or a Robin Hood Champion of Sherwood off the top is going to mean Kawa can get to that magical 20 mark. It's an Aladdin. He can't stop me getting to 20 with the Goat in hand and the cards on the board. And I just about scrape across the line by a single law. It was an absolutely incredible game. And there's another incredible game coming right up. If you thought that one was close, this next game is even more close. If you can possibly believe it. It is an absolute nail-biter. Kawa's going to be going first again. Now, as the player going second, it is my right to allow Kawa to announce his mulligans first. So if I've got one critique of what I do here is I put these 2 cards down on the table because I'm not interested in them and it's kind of me helping me make my decision making. I end up mulliganing 6, and this includes a giant Tinkerbell. But really what I should do is I should wait for Kawa to make his decision on what he mulligans, and then I start to announce and give him any information. Even just me, the small act of me putting 2 cards down on the table while giving him next to no information, it is still information I'm providing him with before I need to. So that's just something to bear in mind. I actually mulligan a giant Tink here, and this is a pivotal decision. It's the one I deliberated and thought about for the longest time. Again, wouldn't advise you to still be shuffling your deck and your opponent playing the first card. Kara and I are just good friends. So we're just chilling. We don't mind too much. We know neither player's going to be up to anything dodgy. The Benja gets inked, of course, with no items in Kawa's deck. And this decision to get rid of the Tinkerbell was very controversial. I wanted to dig into my deck as much as possible to try and find multiple Babooms, for example. 1 Baboom is often not going to be enough in this kind of matchup. And I do have 4 Tinkerbells in the deck, so I'm hoping that either in the 6 cards that I just drew or the 4 cards I'm going to draw before turn 4, so 10 cards in total, that one of those will be another giant Tinkerbell, and I'm going to find her at the right moment. And of course, the other thing is I didn't have the tiny Tink Tactician available when I mulliganed the giant Tink, but I now do have that card available, and I'm probably sat here thinking, wishing, oh my goodness, right now I wish I had the giant Tink still in my hand. Magic Broom's going to quest for 1 and put a point on the board. Of course, Baboom onto the Robin Hood's a little bit tempting, but Baboom is being pretty overworked in this matchup. Diablo, of course, what I'm really hoping to be hitting with that Baboom. And I make a very interesting ink decision here. One on hindsight I don't like, which is I decide to ink a Magic Broom instead of one of my 2 Queen's Castles. I just don't really see why this makes any sense. I think the Queen's Castle would have been a better bet. So I've mentioned previously, I think Magic Brooms and Churnabogs get over-inked often. You can just find a time to put them down, quest for 1, and then draw with them again. And the Magic Broom is even better to hold on to, because even if you don't want to quest with it, you can still just put it down on the board at some point and draw with it instantly to thin your deck a little bit more. So I think it was a bit of a weird decision for myself to ink the Broom instead of one of my 2 castles. Doesn't really matter, as Bucky discards here, and I get rid of one of the castles. This most likely would have been the Broom in this case. I would have decided to get rid of. So it didn't matter really at all, I don't think, but still, having watched my games back, it's a decision I think I got wrong. And I do think that the mulligan and the early ink decisions are probably the most difficult decisions to play optimally in Dizzy Lorcana. The longer the game goes on, you tend to have less decisions to make in that regard. Of course, that's not quite the case with Sapphire decks in particular. So Smee gets inked, and in comes the Tiny Tink. The Tiny Tink here is a little bit of a bluff. I don't have that Giant Tink, of course, regretting at this moment in time my decision to mulligan it away. However, it's a bit of a bluff. This Tiny Tink is exerting so much pressure onto Kawa's side of the board, even without the Giant Tink in my hand. And of course, it opens up the possibility of me just top decking the Giant Tink, top decking a friend on the other side. This Diablo forces me to discard, but suddenly the Robin Hood, which really wants to challenge into Smee, remove it, and gain lore, is suddenly not able to do that due to the threat of Tinkerbell shifting in, cleaning up the Bucky prematurely, as well as dealing with Diablo, and actually top deck it at the exact moment as well. So Kawa's going to think I had it all along. Little does he know it was a bluff I made on turn 3, really, to play the Tiny Tink. Smee's going to quest. Of course, getting pretty dangerously close to 3 damage on Smee. I flex my Fox, which is signed by Alice Pistoni. She was at the Lille event. So that goes into the Inkwell for a rainy day. And I am going to spend 4 to shift in the Tink. Of course, I've got a decision here if I quest or not. And I do decide to quest. I think at this moment in time, I'm just really valuing as much lore as possible. Of course, ultimately, questing is necessary to win the game. And the Tink isn't really threatened that much. I'm not scared, particularly, of the Diablo and the Robin Hood challenging into Tinkerbell. I think I would be pretty happy if I do see my opponent make that decision. Smee, pretty close to 3 damage as well. Of course, I'm threatening Belle on 5. Kawa does know that I have it, and Kawa might be a little bit scared of Belle moving those 2 damage counters onto Diablo, which could be part of the reason, as well as the second Diablo does decide to take a bit of an unorthodox line here. Kawa makes a really interesting decision here to challenge the Tinkerbell with both Diablo and Robin Hood, putting them up to 4 lore. Removes the Tinkerbell, but of course sacrifices a Diablo. Now, he's also risking another Tinkerbell here because I could clean up the Robin Hood pretty easily, but I'm only at 4 ink, I do believe. And therefore, even if I had a Tinkerbell available right now, it wouldn't be able to come through if I'm not mistaken, because I think it's just 4 ink I currently sit at. And I am going to spend 2 for Baboom. And I say to Kawa, I'm like, which one, mate? You pick. Again, wouldn't recommend doing this at your locals, but I'm just bantering him a bit. You might be wondering, what are you doing, Spessy? Why are you letting him pick? Well, it's because I got another. He knew it was coming before I even played the second one. I'm like, sorry, mate. I did draw that second Baboom off the top there. And I'm now left in a very interesting position with 5 ink, 1 card in hand, which is a Queen's Castle. I might actually still be at 4 ink. I don't think I inked here. Very low on cards. Which is, do I quest with Smee, sacrifice? The punish is Tinkerbell. The punish is Storm Rage on, maybe a Strength of a Raging Fire. I decide to leave it down because I'm at 4 ink right now and I'm going to be playing the Queen's Castle next turn. What I could potentially do is ink the card off the top, play the Queen's Castle and move the Smee into the castle to get some card draw. And it's another Diablo and I can't believe it. Can you stop playing Diablo, please? 2 cards in hand for me now. One's a Queen's Castle. I am going to quest. Puts me up to 9. Kawa's still on 5. And this is the benefit, instantly rewarded for not questing with that Smee because I can play it again. And I'm still chilling at 4 ink and just 1 card in hand. I haven't over-inked. I haven't inked this castle. It's only 2 copies of Belle and 4 copies of Tinkerbell, one of which is already gone. So there's only 5 cards in my deck which cost 5 or more. So there's not a huge need for me to put that Queen's Castle into the Inkwell. And of course, now I've got the board control, this is really the time where Queen's Castle can pop off. Aladdin gets inked, and Kawa now, with no cards in hand, and I kind of play around with him again here. He's ready to draw, and I'm like, no, you wait for me, mate. Oh, no, not yet. There we go. He draws. So I've got a Queen's Castle and another card in hand. I'm at 4 ink. The Smee is going to quest, as is the Mim. It puts me up to 12. Kawa currently at 6 after that Diablo quest. In comes the Queen's Castle, the perfect moment for the castle. Now, with this 1 card in hand, I'm not certain what it is, but of course I've got the option of inking it and moving into the castle, but with Diablo down on the board, that would also mean an extra card drawn for Kawa here. Kawa's just at 1 card in hand, so I really want to mitigate as much. Oh, he's at 2. I want to mitigate. Oh, he's not. He's at 3. Where did that come from? I want to mitigate the Diablo draw as much as possible. Diablo is going to sing Strength of Raging Fire, which removes Smee. We saw the Storm Rage on dealing 2 damage in game 1, and then this time it's the Strength of a Raging Fire, which puts in some serious work against my Mr. Smee bumbling mate. No ink spent for that. 4 spent for Jafar. That is both, I think there's 1 card maybe left in Kawa's hand here. My Queen's Castle, of course, looking pretty safe at this moment in time with the Snake as well, still a threat. Kawa can quest for 3 here because it's just 1 card in hand with Flynn. But because of my early aggression and the position, Kawa is forced now at this moment in time, despite going first in the game, to start, instead of questing for 3, dealing just 2 damage to Queen's Castle. This is where that extra questing power potentially from Maleficence can be so important in this deck. Not necessarily in this game, but this is what it can do for you. It can just flip the game on its head a little bit. That early aggressive questing power with cards like Smee, Magic Broom, Churnabogs. In comes the goat. Suddenly I'm at 15 and Kawa's not happy to see the goat, and I quest her and I'm at 16. 1 card in hand for me. So the Flynn is questing for 3. I believe it's a snake. I'm pretty sure the last card in my hand here is, in fact, a snake. I'm feeling confident. I feel like it's over. A goat on the board, a snake in the hand, a castle looking pretty protected. It is not over. It is far from over. Kawa's got a Bruno in hand, I believe, and has a really interesting decision we talked about in the game afterwards, where they do have the option of using Bruno here on either the goat or the snake. Let's say they go Bruno on the goat. I'd go up to 17, but then if the 50-50 misses and the goat is not discarded, I would be able to, of course, replay the goat, putting me to 18 and the castle getting me to 20 potentially, or the snake putting me to 19. Similarly, if he goes for the snake with the Bruno and it misses, that would give me the opportunity to quest of the goat, play the snake, play the goat. So Kawa, not wanting to Bruno either of these cards at this moment in time, is able to deal with the castle. They're at 6 lore right now as Robin Hood comes through and the shift Robin Hood. And then the Flynn Rider puts Kawa up to 9 lore. I think I'm only at 4 cards in my Inkwell still as well, worth noting. 2 cards in hand. I'm feeling so confident. I like my hand. I'm going to quest with both, of course. I am just considering, is there ever a world I want to slam into the Jafar or anything like that? Of course, the Diablo and Flynn Rider are evasive, so they're not targetable. Just making sure that he's not threatening lethal with this Flynn Rider. Of course, the Flynn, potentially, if I dump my hand, could quest for 4. But that still wouldn't be enough, even if everything else quests. Snake and the goat quest, I'm at 18. And I like my hand a lot because I believe my hand is a snake and another snake. I'm at 19. In fact, no, it's a baboon. So I spend 2 to baboon and it's the Diablo which gets hit. I'm at 19 and I've got a goat in hand. It's over, isn't it? It's not. It is not over because of we don't talk about Bruno in Kawa's hand. Kawa's going to have the opportunity to remove the snake and then play Bruno, which is then going to bounce the snake back into my hand, and it's going to be a 50-50 on whether it's snake discarded or goat discarded. I'm going to let the camera microphone for Kawa and I's reactions take over for the rest of the video. But if you did enjoy it, please give it a like. Big shout out to Kawa. Make sure you check out Podcana. Subscribe if you did. If you want to see some more gameplay from this tournament, there is going to be a bonus game available only on Patreon. So go subscribe to that if you want to go and see some more action. Got the game against Alphos and Lorcana villain coming in the next couple days. This was a nail biter. See you guys soon. Bye.
And then also explains into how well we let you be
Oh my goodness, you're kidding me, bro. Oh! Oh my goodness. How do we do this? How do we do this? Left hand, right hand? But you just pick a hand. What do you want to do? Barrel? Point? Don't look. Can I even like conceal my screen and just have a left hand, right hand? Put them in. Just take a pic, mate. It all comes down to this! Let's go! Oh, dude. 50-50. Oh my goodness.